The Detroit Lions have had a total of 73 starting quarterbacks since their inception in 1930, starting with a man named Chuck Bennett. However, this is not a video going over the history of the quarterback position for the Lions. Instead, it is a video going over who I believe to be the greatest quarterback in Detroit Lions history. Let's lay a little bit of groundwork for this video. Firstly, in this video, we will only be going over quarterbacks that had a total of 17 starts for the Detroit Lions while wearing the jersey. That is to replicate as if they played one full season as a Detroit Lions starter in 2024. So that drops the total number of quarterbacks from 73 that we talked about earlier down to only 21 total quarterbacks. Secondly, I'm going to go over three different definitions of what could be deemed as the greatest of all time. And that is going to be a historical quarterback, a statistical quarterback, and a quarterback with the most playoff success since the start of the Super Bowl era. Now, I want to be specific with that last part due to the fact that I believe that after the AFL and NFL started playing together in the Super Bowl era, the competition level for the NFL drastically increased before that point. So, being specific in that allows me to show that there is a difference between the championships that were won when it was a world championship versus when it was the Super Bowl playoff era. However, all of these definitions could be viewed as a reason to consider someone the greatest of all time. The historical quarterback lays the groundwork for what the Lions are today and still has a ton of recognition in the Detroit community. A statistical quarterback, if you like stats and you think that the greatest stats in the Lions history should be considered the greatest, then there you go. And as for playoff success, that just boils down to the end of the regular season. The only thing you're trying to do is get higher into the postseason and get to the Super Bowl. Starting off with the most famous historical figure in Detroit Lions history, a man named Bobby Lane. If you don't know who Bobby Lane is, he is one of the most notorious historical figures in Detroit Lions history. Many know him for the curse he placed on the team when the management at the time decided to trade him, claiming that the Lions would not win another championship for the next 50 years. And what happened the years Bobby's curse was supposed to expire? The Lions ended up going 0-16, a completely winless team for the first time in the 16-game regular season. But besides the curse placed on the team, let's do a little bit of history on him and why I think he's the greatest historical quarterback. Lane was traded to the Lions in 1950 for wide receiver Bob Mann. The first two seasons, whilst not terrible with the Lions in 1950 and 1951, did not end in championships, having a 6-6 record in 1950 and a 7-4-1 record in 1951, even though he did end up leading the league in passing yards in both of those years. However, in the following two seasons, 1952 and 1953, Lane ended up taking the Lions to the World Championship, and they won both of those games. For the next three seasons with Lane, it would be a drought. But the Lions would win one more championship with Lane before they eventually traded him to the Steelers, and Bobby Lane's curse would take effect on the Detroit Lions. As for the stats for Bobby Lane, he still holds the number 2 spot in most places with things like yards, pass attempts, and touchdowns with the Lions. There's only one quarterback above him in those statistics, and only one currently who could catch him by the end of the year in Jared Goff, the Lions' current quarterback. You also needed to think that these stats held for almost 70 years, because Bobby Lane stopped playing with the Lions in 1958. With all these achievements and accolades, I really can't see anybody else more suited to be a historical great for the Detroit Lions than Bobby Lane. Moving on, who is the statistical great in Detroit Lions history, and there's no debate over who this is, and that is a man named Matthew Stafford. Stafford holds the record statistically for every single feasible quarterback statistic you can think of: yards, touchdowns, pass attempts, pass completions, rush yards for a QB, rush touchdowns for a QB. He is a dominant player with the statistics, as he is 3 times the statistical advantage over anybody behind him. And the individual behind him directly is still Bobby Lane. Bobby, as mentioned earlier, ended his career with a little over 15,000 total yards, while Stafford has roughly 45,000 yards for his entire career with the Lions. The only person who could feasibly catch him at all would be Jared Goff, the current quarterback, and he would still need to play almost 3 times the amount of football for the Lions as he has right now. Stafford is also one of the best winners in Detroit Lions history, but was plagued with an incompetent management that prevented him from winning more playoff games. Another statistical advantage that he has is that he is one of only 9 quarterbacks to throw for 5,000 yards in a single season, putting him in the likes of Patrick Mahomes, Peyton Manning, and Tom Brady. So, with all of that sort of information for you, I don't believe there's anybody who can even come close to the statistical advantage he has and being the greatest statistical quarterback the Lions have ever had. And finally, we'll move on to what I believe is the best quarterback with playoff success in the Super Bowl era for the Detroit Lions. To be fair, this list is very small as the Lions have not had any playoff success of note for very long periods of time. Only two quarterbacks in total have actually won playoff games with the Lions. First up, a man named Eric Kramer, who was a backup quarterback for the Detroit Lions when their starter eventually did go down. However, that team was more run by Barry Sanders in the rush offense for the team. Next, of course, everybody knows the recent success that we had in 2023 2024 and that postseason with Jared Goff, doubling the total amount of playoff wins and taking us to the NFC Championship game for the first time since 1991. Of course, it's no surprise that I'm going to say Jared Goff is the best winner in the postseason that we have ever had. Even in the regular season, taking our team to 12-5 and then winning two more games in the postseason is a great statistic for the Detroit Lions. It is without a doubt to me, and once again, this is another short one as the Lions' history is very small, that Jared Goff is the greatest winner that we have had to this day in the playoffs. Of course, Matthew Stafford has a case for being the greatest quarterback we've ever had, but his playoff success does not deem it to be in this current category. So, with all that being said, I will be keeping Jared Goff in this position as the greatest playoff winner that the Detroit Lions have had whilst with the team. A little bit of a shorter video here, just wanted to get something out, liked the idea, and wanted to put my opinion out into the internet. Do you believe there's any quarterbacks that should have been on this list that weren't? Do you disagree with where some of the quarterbacks are? Do you think maybe Matthew Stafford should be lower? Do you think Jared Goff shouldn't be in the list at all? I want to hear all you have to say. Leave it down in the comment section below. And if you liked this video, go ahead and leave a like for me and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. With all that being said, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and Lions Pride, let's roll.